They carried out thousands of missions in Afghanistan over more than a decade. The elite soldiers of Australia's SAS and Commando regiments were the tip of the spear in a conflict without front lines and often without purpose.
They're the best soldiers you want to deploy with. These guys had, risked their life a lot. They deployed constantly.
Signals Intelligence Officer Brereton deployed with the SAS to Afghanistan in 2012. He is one of less than a handful of Special Operations soldiers to speak out. Thrilled to be part of the most lethal fighting force in the Australian military, Chapman's excitement quickly turned to disenchantment.
You do see people make mistakes and make decisions that you wouldn't think they would make, such as shooting an unarmed person or ordering someone to execute someone. So you definitely, by the end of that deployment, I'm starting to think maybe these soldiers aren't exactly what I thought they would be.
Kick the shit out of that. Shut the
By about 2011 and 2012, whispers and rumours of war crimes involving Australia's Special Forces were beginning to swirl. The men of the SAS and Commandos were all well versed with the laws of war and the rules of engagement. But the grind of deployment after deployment, weak leadership, and a minority rogue element would see those rules increasingly ignored.
They operate in the shadows. So I think that when they went out into the field, there were only 5 or 6 operators. They tended to be people with patrol experience. The officers weren't with them. They were deliberately kept at a distance.
By 2016, vague rumours of war crimes had become serious allegations, and the head of Australia's Special Operations Command, Jeff Sengelman, took his concerns up the chain, sparking an inquiry by the Inspector-General of Defence.
I'm surprised that it didn't take longer, and I'm surprised that they got so far with the small staff they had, given that the Special Forces personnel are trained to withstand torture, so they're very, very good at keeping their secrets. And I think that those secrets were largely held for a couple of years.
Some of the more serious allegations against Australia's Special Forces would be revealed by the media. Last year, 730 documented how the SAS had killed 2 unarmed civilians in a village called Sarkoom, including one who was allegedly beaten to death. After being shot in the thigh, the foreigners took Haji Sada back to his room and started beating him.
You could see these boot marks all over his body, over his neck also.
9 journalists, Nick McKenzie and Chris Masters, reported the anguish of the SAS patrol medic who was treating one of the Sarkoom victims, a wounded man who was later dragged away and killed during that raid.
He didn't die of his wounds, so I can promise you that.
He was murdered?
Well, I believe so, yeah.
Political and military sensitivity to the exposure of possible war crimes was laid bare by the ABC's Afghan Files series. Stories based on the Defence Force's own internal investigations that triggered a firestorm.
A police raid in Australia on the headquarters of the public broadcaster.
The police raided the Sydney headquarters of the country's national broadcaster.
And a search warrant executed on ABC headquarters. For years, Afghans had been complaining to Australian and coalition forces about indiscriminate and unlawful killings, complaints that were ignored or dismissed. But this year came the most damning allegations that some Australian Special Forces crossed the line from elite soldiers to unlawful killers.
Play! Leave! Play!
With Four Corners broadcasting SAS helmet camera footage showing the shooting of an unarmed, frightened Afghan man. The SAS operator seen killing the Afghan in the wheatfield was later referred to the Australian Federal Police for investigation.
The bravery of the very few special operators, etc., who did stand up and say this was wrong, I think it's been an extremely difficult time for them, not just because they felt like they were betraying the regiment, they were betraying the reputation of the regiment, but they were betraying some of their own mates who saw that the higher purpose was to defend whatever happened over there, no matter what.
Today, after 4.5 years, the public was given a redacted version of Justice Paul Brereton's report, and it was even more shocking than predicted. Allegations of 39 unlawful killings by the Special Forces. 25 current or former soldiers were responsible or were accessories. None of the killings happened in the heat of battle. The vast majority of victims were prisoners or under the control of the Australian Special Forces. The report found that guns, radios and grenades were routinely planted on bodies to cover up killings. Justice Brereton largely absolves the senior defence leadership, pinning the blame for these atrocities on the patrol commanders, the sergeants and corporals on the ground. The public report ends on a sombre note, saying that none of us desired the outcome to which we have come. We're all diminished by it.
The shock, even to myself, is the numbers, a lot greater than I expected. In terms of the command structures, I mean, that's an extraordinary question. You know, between a lieutenant general and a lieutenant for 7 years, all of these incidents occur in Afghanistan and none of them know anything about it. I mean, personally, I think the Australian public will have trouble accepting that, but I think a lot of the diggers will say to themselves, well, of course the officers knew, and I think a lot of the diggers will say, well, this is classic, you know, we do the hard work and the officers get off the hook.
The allegations about what has happened are horrific. They are shocking to me as an Afghan.
Afghanistan's Independent Human Rights Commission received 10 complaints about Australian forces since it began tracking civilian deaths in 2008, 4 of which it was able to verify with multiple sources. The Commission's chair, Shahzad Akbar, says that while it's important for the ADF to review its culture, it's crucial the victims are not overlooked.
I think Afghan victims should not be missing from the conversation. They need to feel included and they need to feel heard and acknowledged. And there should be a separate Australian government initiative just focusing on redress and compensation for victims of these incidents, in addition to, of course, reforms required that will improve Australian security forces' conduct.
It took enormous courage for Brereton Chapman to speak up. And for him and other Special Forces soldiers who gave evidence to the Inspector General, this saga is not over. They could be now witnesses in groundbreaking war crimes trials.
I think there'll be a lot of incidences that warrant criminal charges, that plenty of people have come forward and spoken about.
Do you think people should go to jail for what happened over there and for what you saw?
For what I saw, I think those people should go to jail.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.